criticisms on the Supreme Court's credibility and members' competence, I think he was referring to, I do not know, I do not know what his point in asking this question, but the question is, given the criticisms on the SC's credibility and members' competence, would you consider revisiting Cayetano versus Monsod? Do you agree with the premise? The premise is, given the criticisms on the SC's credibility and members' competence, do you agree with that premise? Because if you do not agree with that premise, then you do not need to answer the question.
Your Honor, immutability.
What did you say, Your Honor? You are recording my vote?
The immutability principle says that after finality, the court divests itself of jurisdiction over the case, and no court, not even the Supreme Court, can revive that decision. That decision is already entombed. So wala na tayong magagawa riyan. It may be an erroneous decision. For as long as there was jurisdiction over the case, then that decision will remain as it is.
Jurisdiction, or probably when the judgment is void.
Yeah.
You will agree with me?
Yeah, if
and
the judgment is void.
If the judgment is void and there is a question of jurisdiction, then you may allow a revisit of that decision. On that note, Justice Art, I am through.
Marami pong salamat. Marami pong salamat sa inyo lahat.
Thank you. Thank you.
At halos 2 oras po ang pag-interview dito sa unang nominee for this afternoon, si Justice Arturo Brion ng Korte Suprema. At ginisa po siya ng mga taga-JBC dyan. No? But he talked about death penalty, judicial reform, genuine reform na sinasabi niya, at graft and corruption. At this point, we'd like to welcome dito sa studio si Professor Xiao Chua, his resident historian, and we also still have with us Attorney Dante Desierto. Let me ask you, itong napakatagal na interview sa kanya, what do you think was the most important na nasabi niya dito, na sa palagay niyo talagang kikitil dito sa ating mga viewers? Maaaring sabihin kasi parang mukhang si Justice Peralta talagang para kay Brion And what do you think?
Well, siguro from the point of view, yung issue ng death penalty, yun medyo makaka-relate yung taong bayan doon sa issue na yun. Bagamat sinabi niya sa simula ni Justice Brion na neutral siya, pero quinalify niya yun. Sinabi na niya na dahil sa posibleng magkamali yung mga korte, he believes na the better penalty to impose is yung life imprisonment na lang without further possibility of parole. And from the point of view of the kaming mga lawyers and litigators, meron kasi siyang proposal na instead yung mga cases will be decided by divisions ng Supreme Court. Ang proposal niya is that it will be decided en banc. Meaning to say all the members, all the 15 members ng Supreme Court will decide the case, will tackle the issues in that case. May question on doability, yung practicality nun, kasi medyo
mas tatagal.
Mas tatagal, presumably because 15 people will be talking of the case.
Attorney, I'm just curious, yung lumabas nga dito yung sa death penalty, yung baka magkamali sa mga decisions.
Well,
what does this mean?
There's always the possibility na pwede magkamali. But precisely under the existing setup, the prevailing rules, kapag yung regional trial court nagbaba ng parusang kamatayan, automatically i-review yan ng Supreme Court. So, hindi mo na ma-i-implement yung death penalty, yung sentensya sa baba, i-review muna ng Supreme Court. And kailangan unanimous yung decision doon. So, the danger na magkamali, I think mami-minimize na yun.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Professor Xiao, this is the first time that we are televising itong interview ng the search for the next Chief Justice. Ano sa palagay mo magiging impact nito, especially sa mga law students?
Oo, kailangan tutukan nila ito sapagkat the best minds of this country were nominated, best legal minds, were nominated. At yung pagsagot nila maaari silang makakuha dito ng puntos, ng inspirasyon, no? Yun lang ang tanging masasabi ko, yung mga ibang mga tao, yung mga people who matter really, the poor, no? Yung mga kababayan natin, medyo hirap silang sumunod dahil marami silang trabaho. Tapos yung wika pa, may work sila, tapos yung wika pa medyo malayo sa tao. Ngunit, yung role ng media, doon mahalaga. Sapagkat yung media, sila yung nagsisynthesize at sa gabi, papanoorin nila ito. So, inaabangan pa din nila. Hindi nga lang tutok. So, the law students, the people, pinapanood tayo lahat.
Okay. Right now, umpisa na po ang interview kay Commissioner Rene Sarmiento ng Commission on Elections. Ito po, panoorin natin.
Na nakikiramdam at nagtataguyod ng pangkalahatang promotion of the general welfare. At ang sabi niya, ang pagkapantay-pantay ng social and economic forces para maabot po o makamit ang katarungan. Yan po ang sabi po ni Justice Laurel. Yung ating karapatang pantao po, Justice Peralta at miyembro ng JBC, ay hindi rin po nabigyan ng definisyon sa ating konstitusyon. Pero po, ang pagkakaintindi po nito, ito po ay mga plebeyo, mga karapatang pantao na angkin ng kababaihan at kalalakihan at sumusunod po sa prinsipyong hindi mahiwa-hiwalay at universal. Principles of indivisibility, interdependence, and universality. At dahil po tayo ay ginawa sa imahen ng Diyos. So, paano ko po makakamit po ito? Lalong-lalo na at bilang dagdag po, miyembro ng JBC, ano po ang bisyon at mission ko po? Maliban sa judicial philosophy. Isa pong hudikatura na etiko, may moralidad, at may katapatan sa rule of law, at ang nagtataguyod po ng promotion of the common code. Na ang naglalayon po na maabot po ang maliliit na ating kababayan na iniitsapwera po. At wala pong pagkakataon na magkaroon ng pantay-pantay sa tinatawag na rule of law. Now, how to achieve this is the question. Nandyan po ang pagbalabalanse o tamang timpla ng tinatawag na judicial activism at judicial restraint. Ang tamang timpla o pagbabalanse ng tinatawag na strict construction or loose construction. Ano po yung tinatawag na judicial restraint? Sabi po ni Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, ibig sabihin dahan-dahan sa pagbabago ng mga batas, pagrespeto sa mga past court decisions, at pagbigalang sa lehislatura, sabi ni Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Ang judicial activism naman po, ibig sabihin po, bukas sa mga nangyayari sa lipunan, bukas sa pulso ng sambayanan. Strict construction po, sabi po ni Thomas Jefferson, ibig sabihin po kung ano ang sinasabi ng teksto ng konstitusyon ay dapat sundin. Sabi naman ng unang at greatest justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, si John Marshall, sa kanyang loose construction, dapat ang konstitusyon ay nakikinig sa pulso ng bayan. Nakikinig po sa call or signs of the times. So, ano po ang tamang balanse sa judicial restraint, judicial activism, strict construction o loose construction? Ang sagot po ang tinatawag na mapanlikhang hudikatura, judicial creativity, na binabalanse po ang tradition, progress, and development. Isang magandang halimbawa po na miyembro ng hukuman na nagtaguyod po ng judicial creativity ang dating punong hukom ng Korte Suprema, si Roberto Concepcion. Sa dalawang kaso po, Lansang versus Garcia at kasang Stonehill versus Jokno, siya po ay mapandika ang nagkaroon po ng mga bagong desisyon na hanggang po ay tinatangkilik ng mga estudyante, ng mga hukuman ng ating bansa. Ngayon, ano po yung work program ko po para mapatupad itong tinatawag na judicial philosophy at itong vision and mission? Una-una po yung expansion. Pagpalawak po sa Section 5, Paragraph 5 of Article 10 of the 87 Constitution. Una-una po ang pag-issue po ng mga bagong writs. Halimbawa po, dagdag sa writ of amparo, writ of habeas data, writ of kalikasan, ay writ of salvation, writ of paglalansag, at writ of hoviness. Ano po yung writ o paglalansag? Nasa saligang batas po natin, pag hindi po authorized ng mga private armies, they should be dismantled. So, ibig sabihin, through this writ of paglalansag, itong private armies nagbibigay sakit ng ulo sa ating Pilipino I will be dismantled. Ano po itong writ observation? Marami po tayong mga kababayan na nasa loob ng piitan. Kung sila po ay may karamdaman, ay may sakit, you can resort to writ observation para po maasikaso po ng mga doktor. Writ of habeas, mayroon po tayong mga kabataan na nandun po sa mga piitan din po, nagtatrabaho po sa mga factory. So, kung sila po ay may karapatan na hindi po sinusunod, they can avail of this writ of habeas para po masagot po sila. At panghuli po ang Magna Carta for those behind bars. Marami po nasa piitan, and through this Magna Carta of people behind bars, ang kanilang pong pangangailangan ay matutugunan. And finally, the creation of special human rights courts. Dumadami po ang mga kaso na hindi po nare-resolve dahil po sa mga kasong human rights cases. If we create a special human rights court, ito po ang paraan para po lumuwag ang dakit po ng mga hukuman po natin. Ang pangalawa po, kagalang na hukum at miyembro ng JBC ay ang tungkol po sa enhancing communication with the public in the spirit of transparency. Ang nauna ko pong suhestyon, ang steps of the Supreme Court, dialogue with the public and the media. So ito po isang kaparaanan na pwede pong gawin po.
Pasensya ka na lang, Commissioner, ano? Yung, kasi mayroon pa kami kasing isa.
Opo,
Radyo,
opo.
okay.
Opo.
So, ang unang magtatanong po ay si Attorney Cayosa.
Magandang hapon, ma'am.
Magandang
Komportable
hapon
ho ba kayo nakatayo? Komportable po kayo
Komportable po.
nakatayo? Kahit naabot na isang oras, mahigit?
Opo,
Okay, sige
opo.
po, sige po.
Salamat po, Mr. Chairman. Paumanin niyo na po. I will have to speak in English
Opo.
and feel free to respond in Filipino if you so
Opo.
wish. If we were to continue the presentation that you made, I believe you presented this before the IBP during the forum. You did not get to the part where you would propose knowledge and technical sharing on best judicial practices. Would you care to elaborate what you mean by this? And I was thinking in terms of peer sharing among the judges. But I would like to find out what your thoughts are on this.
Opo. Ito po ay magandang programa ng Korte Suprema. Dahil una-una po, ito po ay isinasagawa ng Komisyon, COMELEC, na kung saan po ako ay nanunungkulan yung sharing of best election practices. Ako po ay dumalo sa mga komperensya na kung saan natuto po tayo sa kanila at sila sa atin. Halimbawa po, yung pagkakaroon ng satellite registration sa mga malls. Noong 2011, more than 38 malls ang ginawang registration center po for PWDs, persons with disabilities. Sa ibang bansa, this is a best or good election practice. Natuto po sa atin. Pangalawa po, nandiyan po yung pagkakatayo ng interagency and NGO network to empower PWDs, to empower IPs, to empower detainees. Wala po sa ibang bansa na isang electoral commission na kung saan po may interagency where NGOs and government are working together. So, sa hukuman po, kung ako po ay maging punong hukom, magkakaroon po ng sharing of best practice. For instance po, sa India, may tinatawag na epistolary jurisdiction sa India po. Ang pasimuno po ay Chief Justice Bhagwati ng India. Ibig sabihin, sa sulat lang po, kung isa po ay isang mahirap, walang kakayan kumuha ng abogado, isang sulat, the Supreme Court will entertain this epistle or letter or complaint from isang manggagawa, isang magsasaka, o isang mahirap. So, best judicial practice na pwedeng matutunan po natin. Sa Estados Unidos po, nag-create po ng judicial conference si Chief Justice Staff noon, na kung saan pulong po ng mga magistrado ng Korte Suprema, appellate courts, and yearly, they share their experiences, lessons from one another. So ito po ay pwede pong gawin po natin sa ating bansa para po lalong umunlad po ang pagre-resolve ng ating mga kaso.
Maraming salamat ulit. Dalawang tanong na lang po. What is your concept of restorative justice, and would you extend the application of restorative justice to adult offenders?
Ako po ay may prison advocacy. Ako po ang pangulo ng PRESO. PRESO meaning Prison Rehabilitation Empowerment Service Organization. Ito po ay binubuo po ng mga madre, kaparian, mga miyembro ng NGOs at retired members of the judiciary. Ako po ay pabor sa restorative justice na sa halip na kaparusahan, maghanap po ng kaparaanan to rehabilitate a convict, a person. Hindi po parusa. Dahil po ang tao ay magandang kalidad with qualities. So by restoring his dignity to restorative justice, magiging productive member po siya ng ating lipunan. And in this kind of justice, the community po is involved to restore the dignity of that person. Ako po ay pabor po sa ganitong hustisya sa ating lipunan.
Would you go so far as to indicating in the judgment where the offender is found guilty to require him to undergo counseling or rehabilitation as part of the decision?
Ako po ay sang-ayon po sa mungkahingan na maging bahagi ng ating mga desisyon ang counseling services, because when we counsel, we inspire people. Lalong bumabalik ang kalang tiwala sa sarili at kalang dignidad. So I think this should part of the judgment to counsel and inspire the convicts.
My last question.
Opo.
Were there instances in your public career where your independence or integrity was put to test, and when you had to decide or rule in conflict with the interests of an appointing authority?
Ilang beses po ako na nagdesisyon po sa COMELEC. I can cite 6 or 7 cases. Ako po ay dissenting opinion. Halimbawa po ang kaso ng Ladlad, Liberal Party versus COMELEC, Amora versus COMELEC, Panlaki versus COMELEC, at ilan pa ho. Pwede kong banggitin po yung kaso ng Mendoza versus Pagdanganan. Ang kaso po ng sa Pampanga involving Governor Panlilio. And in all these cases, I was sustained by the Supreme Court. Though I was the dissenter in these cases, pagdating po sa Korte Suprema, binanggit po ang pangalan ko and I was sustained, affirmed by the Supreme Court in these cases. And if I may add, Your Honor, please, sa kaso po ng Anggaling Pinoy. Ako po ay hinirang ng ating Pangulong GMA. But I voted against the nominee of Anggaling Pinoy, si Kinatawan Mikey Arroyo, knowing and believing that he could not well represent the security guards. Ako po ay dissenting opinion po sa kaso niyan. So in all these cases, I have maintained my independence to ensure the integrity and, of course, the independence of the Constitutional Commission like the COMELEC.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Good luck.
Salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney Mejia, please.
Thank you, Justice Peralta. Magandang hapon po, Commissioner Sarmiento.
Magandang hapon po.
Sasamantalahin ko po yung pagkakataong ito na nagkaroon ng isang kandidato o aplikante na kasapi ng nagbalangkas ng ating 1987 Constitution. Kasi po may mga katanungan at batid naman ninyo ito na may kinalaman katulad sa JBC, yun pong nakalipas na pasya ng ating Korte Suprema tungkol po sa bilang ng kailangan bilang ng pagiging kasapi ng JBC. Ano po ang bilang pong miyembro ng Constitutional Commission, ano po ang palagay ninyo rito?
Una-una po, ginagalang ko po ang naging kapasyahan ng ating hukuman tungkol po sa isyong ito, although may pending motion for reconsideration. Kung po'y tatanungin nyo at batay po sa aking memorya, sa aming diskusyon sa Constitutional Commission of 1986. Initially, ang gusto po ng Commission ay unicameral legislature. As a matter of fact, ako po, si Christian Monsod, ay nag-sponsor po ng resolution providing for a unicameral legislature. Pero po sa botohan po sa plenary session ng CONCON, natalo po ng isang boto. Yung unicameral, naging bicameral. Kaya nga po, sa tingin ko po, yung isang botong yun ay para sa unicameral. At dahil po ang ating saligang batas provides for bicameral legislature, para sa akin po, tama lang na kada house ay mayroon pong kinatawan sa JBC.
Ganon din po ba dun sa sususog sa saligang batas?
Ako din po ay sang-ayon din po, Ginoong Attorney Mejia, na tungkol po sa amendments to the Constitution, na isa pong issue po ngayon, dahil may mga advocates po for charter change. So kung ito po ay maipagpatuloy, tulad ng amending the economic provisions of the Constitution, solely the economic provisions, ano po yung proseso ng amendment? Ako po, sa tingin ko po, we follow the process of each house voting 3/4 independently. Yung 3/4 lang po na referring to the Congress as a whole, because our thinking at the time, it was unicameral legislature. But there were supervening events. At ang nangyari po, dahil sa isang boto, nanalo ang bicameral. Kaya tama lang po, na ang botohan po ay 3/4 sa House, 3/4 din po sa Senado.
Salamat po. Kaugnay pa rin po sa ibang mga probisyon ng saligang batas. Batid naman po natin na may mga probisyon na nahihimbing, o natutulog at hindi naisa sa katuparan. Pangunahin po dito yung pagbawal po sa mga political dynasties. Sa palagay po ba ninyo, kapag kayo naging Chief Justice, mayroon po kayong magagawa tungkol dito?
Okay. Ang provision na yan ay sponsored po ni Commissioner Liedo. Kasama po ako. To democratize access to political opportunities, dapat po ipagbawal po ang political dynasty. That there will bills introduced in Congress, pero ito po ay frozen, nasa back burner po. Ilang attempts po, kasama po ang Senador Miriam Defensor Santiago, Senator Teofisto Ginggona, Senator Tanyada, pero ito po ay hindi na sa kutuparan. So, kung ako po ay uupo, okay, by God's will, sa Korte Suprema, ako po ay gagawa ng paraan na magkaroon po ng buhay ang constitutional provision po ito.
Ayon po kay dating Chief Justice Panganiban, isa daw sa pamantayan ng isang mahusay na Chief Justice ay kailangan ni kanya ay isang passionate reformer. Kung tama po yung pagsasalin ko, masigasig na tagapagpabago. Palagay po ba ninyo, kayo po ay akma sa pamantayang ito?
Sa tingin ko po, ako po ay, humbly speaking, ay akma kung pag-uusapan po ang pagbabago. Una-una ako po ay naging miyembro ng Constitutional Commission of 1986. Ano po yung mga pagbabago na aming na-introduce sa ating saligang batas? Creation of the Commission on Human Rights. Isa po tayo sa mga bansa na nanguna sa pagbuo ng Commission on Human Rights. Diyan po sa Bill of Rights, na diyan po ang Independent and Competent Counsel during custodial investigation na kinaibahagi sa Constitutional Commission at naaprubahan. Nandyan po ang anti-torture and indemnification of victims of torture, which was approved by the Constitutional Commission and part of the Bill of Rights. At nandyan po yung legal assistance to the underprivileged. Isa pong proposal ko, adopted by the Constitution, nasa Bill of Rights po and Article of Judiciary, at panghuli po ang Judicial and Bar Council. Isa pa ako sumuporta na magkaroon po ng Judicial and Bar Council sa po Commission on Appointments. At natadagdag ko po, kailangan na Attorney Mejia, sa COMELEC, ako po ay nakaupo bilang commissioner. Ano po ang mga pagbabago po dyan? We have created in the COMELEC an interagency, an NGO network to empower detainees. For the first time in our history, in 2010, more than 17,000 detainees voted from the start of our republic. 2010 October, 15,000 po ang bumoto sa barangay elections at may isang nanalong barangay chairman po, isang detainee sa Bai, Pangasinan. Interagency and NGO network to empower persons with disabilities. For the first time tayo po nagkaroon ng satellite registration sa 38 shopping malls. And this is a first, a good election practice recognized around the world. And we have approved a resolution na sa darating na 2013, accessible polling stations po sa may kapansanan, sa matatanda, sa pregnant women. Hindi na po aakyat sa second floor at third floor. Bagkus po sila po ay boboto sa ibaba. And finally, we have indigenous peoples, 16 million of them throughout the country. Ito po ang Mangyan, Ita, Negrito. Taningin mo sila, anong pangalan mo? Medicol, Kortal. Kailan ka pinanganak? Tag-ulan, Singkamas, Tagmanga. Ito po ang sitwasyon po nila. We have created an interagency and NGO network to empower indigenous peoples. Kung walang identification card, on the basis of a certificate of confirmation, issued by the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, sila po ay pwede magparehistro at pumoto. And of course, automation, which I supported before 2010 elections. So ito po ang mga pagbabago nagpapakitang ako po ay passionate for reforms at pagbabago sa ating lipunan.
Hindi naman po siguro lingid sa inyong kaalaman na mayroong pagtutol sa inyong paghirang, no, bilang Chief Justice. At kabilang na hinahanap ko po kanina, kaya lang mukhang hindi ko po nadala, pero kung natatandaan ko, ang pagtutol po na ito, pangunahin dito ay galing kay Congressman Maliksi at kay Senator Cayetano. No? Maaari po bang bigyan nyo kaming paglilinaw kung ano po ang kung tungkol po saan ito at ano po ang posisyon nyo rito?
Ito po ay tungkol una-una yung reklamo po ni Congressman Maliksi. Ito po ay protesta ng isang alkalding natalo, si Sakilayan, sa Imus, Cavite. Siya po sa eleksyon ay nanalo po ng walang more than 8,000 votes. Pero po sa protesta na inihain po ng kanyang kalaban si Maliksi, na without resorting po sa picture images na sinasabi po ng ating resolusyon based on manual recount and ignoring the plea of Mr. Sakilay, nagdesisyon po ang RTC of Cavite in favor of Sakilayan. Yung 8,000 na wala po. And to think that this is automation. Based on manual recount, not on the rules on automation that we have adapted to resolve electoral protest. So, umakyat po si Sakilayan sa COMELEC. Ako po ang presiding commissioner ng COMELEC. So, sabi ko, we issue a TRO para po hindi makaupo while resolving this case on the merits or this special petition for certiorari. Dahil ako po ay naniniwala na collective po ang aming desisyon, 3 pong pangalan ang nakalagay po sa order. Ako po at 2 miyembro ng komisyon. So, pinirmahan ko po yon for the issuance of a TRO. Nag-descend po yung 2 kasama ko. Ngayon, in the spirit of transparency, because of a heated political climate in that place, ako po yung nag-order. Ilabas po natin ito, malaman ng public. I've been always for transparency, Your Honor, please. At dahil po dyan, nagreklamo po si Congressman Maliksi, bakit pinalabas ko po. Pero wala pang rules na prohibiting me as the presiding commissioner of the COMELEC. And again, in the spirit of transparency, dapat malaman ng taong bayan. That evening, may isa pong interview sa television at ako po ay tinanong. Para po maging malinaw, sinabi ko po sa television at alam ko nakikinig po si Mr. Sakilayan. Mr. Sakilayan, wala pong TRO. Dahil ako po bumoto, but I was overruled. Ako po ay outvoted ng 2, wala pang TRO. And the following day, I issued another order setting the case for hearing para ipakitang walang TRO na in-issue po ng COMELEC. So not in our rules, Mr. Your Honor, forbidding me to release this order. I want for people to know ano po ang katotohanan at boto. Doon po naman po sa kaso po ng Tinga versus Cayetano, ito po yung dati pong nakahain po sa 2nd Division. Ngunit dahil po pina-inhibit po yung mga miyembro ng second division, at dahil po may tiwala sa first division na kung saan ako po ang presiding officer, believing in our fairness and impartiality, ito po ay nalipat po sa amin on the motion filed by Mrs. Cayetano. I filed a comment, Your Honor, please, attaching these motions to show that it was transferred to us believing in the independence and impartiality of the First Division. Kino-question po ang aking independence and probity and competence dahil po sa kasong ito. But this would only show a testament regarding my independence, my probity, and competence. Your Honor, please, the case was transferred to us April 2011. My last order was July 17, 2012. Na kung hindi po pwedeng i-retrieve, why not decrypt yung photo image po? 13 orders were already issued from April 11 up to July 17, 2012. No question about my independence. No motion assailing my integrity as the presiding commissioner of that first division. 13 orders, Your Honor, please. Ngayon, nung na po sa objection, ako daw po ay napasama sa fraud sa 2007 and 2010. Mismong po ang chairman ng COMELEC na si Chairman Sixto Brillantes, na aming iginagalang po. Mismong si Secretary of Justice Laila de Lima, na at that time abogado po ng oposisyon, ang sinabing wala akong kinalaman sa fraud na nangyari po noong 2007. Sumulat po ang Ambassador Tita de Villa ng PPCRV the other day submitted to the JBC and saying that since 2007, 2008, 2009, and up to registration's arm, kanya po nakita ang aking performance, upholding integrity and honesty. At wala pong reklamo po na NAMFREL, PPCRV, Diocese of Marawi, kung ano paman, tungkol po sa pagpapatakbo ng halalan po doon. As a matter of fact, Your Honor, please, in 2010, the Islamic Electoral Reform Movement ay binigyan po yung abang lingkod, recognition for upholding the integrity of elections. Of course, it was not a perfect. No elections are perfect. It's a big management problem or headache ang election. But I've done my best, my very best, to uphold integrity of the electoral process.
Salamat po, yun na po yung huling katanungan ko. Thank you, Justice Peralta. Good luck po.
Justice Lacman, please.
Magandang hapon po.
Ma'am, magandang hapon po.
Sarmiento.
Magandang hapon po, ma'am.
Ako ay matamang nakinig ng inyong pangunahing pananalita.
Salamat po.
At ako ay nasiyahan dahil nailahad nyo ng malinaw at buong buo ang inyong mga binabalak gawin kung kayo ay matatalaga bilang punong maestrado ng ating kataas-taasang hukuman.
Salamat po, ma'am.
Nailahad nyo ng malinaw ang larawan, ang magiging larawan ng ating hukuman kung kayo ang magiging ulo ng hudikatura. Meron akong mga inihandang mga katanungan, ngunit yon ay nasagot na ng malinaw sa pagtatanong ng aking mga kasamahan. Kaya palagay ko dahil hindi ko na kailangang sayangin pa ang inyong oras at wala na akong itatanong. I just want to wish you good luck.
Salamat po, ma'am.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Justice Hermosi Simaden, sir.
Magandang hapon po, Justice po. Magandang hapon po.
Attorney Sarmiento and I were confirmed together at the Commission on Appointments. Attorney Sarmiento, Commissioner Sarmiento has been made famous and popular as a commissioner of the Commission elections.
Maraming salamat po,
Now,
Justice.
you do not propose to write your decisions in Filipino.
Mayroon pong isang huwes, si Judge Gatbaitan, no? Nagsusulat po ng Tagalog, wikang Pilipino. Sa Bulacan, isang huwes nagsusulat po ng wikang Pilipino. But it will take a long time, ano po, na sumunod sa wikang Pilipino. But baka pwedeng pag-usapan po sa Korte Suprema, mas maraming makakaintindi po kung ano
I
po
wonder
ang
if that
desisyon.
will be published in the Supreme Court reports annotated.
Malaki pong adjustment po sa atin, pwedeng umpisahan po.
Will you write your decisions in English? As Chief Justice, not in Filipino. Do you believe that there are many provisions in the Constitution, 1987 Constitution, which you helped approve, that need amendments or revision?
Opo, kagalang-galang na hukom, Justice
Do you
Hermosissima.
agree to the
Opo.
convening of a constituent assembly to amend the Constitution instead of a constitutional convention?
Justice Hermosissima, I'm in favor of a constituent assembly as a mode of amending the Constitution. From 1789 up to the present, the U.S. Constitution was amended 27 times. And the process, Your Honor, please, was through Congress. No constitutional convention was convened in the entire history of the USA to amend the U.S. Constitution 27 times, though there were 11,000 proposed amendments to the U.S. Constitution, and the process was 2/3 of its House voting and then presenting to the state for ratification. So
All
ito
right,
po ang-
in the Constituent Assembly that is being proposed, with the Senate and the House, will they be voting together, separately or jointly?
Mr. Justice, you have to vote separately because kung jointly po, matatalo po ang Senado. I will follow the formula being proposed by my good friend and colleague in the Commission,
What is the statement?
Berna's formula.
What is the statement in the Constitution
Opo.
which you framed?
Constitution po, kumbaga-
Separately or jointly?
ang intindi po namin yan po sa Constitution as written textually, mukhang buo. Hindi po malinaw po no, ang ating Constitution tungkol sa amendment. Again, Mr. Justice, because of the issue of unicameral and bicameral, I think, in all honesty, it was overlooked by the Constitutional Commission, by the Committee on Style, kung bakit hindi po ito nalinaw.
So that's another provision that has been overlooked.
I think so, Mr. Justice, in all honesty and humility.
So what do you say? Separately or jointly?
It should be separately.
Separately.
Each House voting separately.
What do you say to the proposition of Father Bernas that
It's a good-
that the House first approves certain provisions of the Constitution, amendments, and then it's brought up to the Senate for approval, for confirmation.
It is a good proposition from
Of course,
Father Bernas.
that should be approved by the people as a whole.
Totoo po yan for ratification by the people as a whole. Yan po ang tinatawag po, Justice Hermosissimang, the Bernas formula, the Bernas mode of amending the Constitution. Ako po ay bukas at sangayon po sa kanyang proposisyon na ang kaparaanan po ay mangunguna ang mababang kapulungan at susunod po ang Senado.
Would you agree to a charter amendment that would allow the sale of Philippine lands to foreigners as opposed to the Krivenko doctrine?
Your Honor, please, sa ngayon po may mga proposals po to amend the economic provisions of the Constitution. Ako po ay bukas po dyan dahil nga po sa era of globalization. At batay po sa karanasan ng maraming bansa, binubuksan po ang kanilang ekonomiya. Yung 60-40 sharing formula or equity principle ay mukhang outmoded na po. At dapat buksan po ito para yung mga restrictions po sa ating saligang batas on economic provisions ay mabuksan. At tayo po ay makasama po sa mga bansang nangunguna po sa atin. That's why ako po ay sumasang-ayon na mag-usap po ang Senado, Kongreso at ang ating Pangulo para po pag-isipan po ang pagbabago ng ating saligang batas strictly on the economic provisions.
I went to Beijing some time ago, and well, there, since it's a communist country, no private individual is allowed to own lands. But yet, I could see several structures, hotels, and other buildings constructed by private individuals or private corporations. And so I asked them, why, how come? How did these people construct buildings which will last for years? The answer was they would lease the land for 99 years. Well, it's just like sale. Well, so you agree to the abolition of the 60-40 proposition?
Not necessarily po, Justice, na completely abolition of the 60-40 equity formula. Marahil po pwedeng dagdagan po. Pwede pong 80-20. Kumbaga, 60-40, medyo taasan po yung equity po.
The idea is to bring investments to...
To bring investments, Your Honor, please, baka pwede pong 50-50. Isa po magandang formula po yan. Isang 50-50. This will attract investments and based on studies po, those with relaxed economic provisions in their constitution. Where
Do you agree to the amendments on the mining laws just recently proposed by the President?
Mainit po ang pagdedebate tungkol po sa mining laws, no? Pero ko po ay bukas if it will bring more investments to our country, provided properly regulated and with strict laws on enforcement. Kung ito po ay magpapaganda ng hanapbuhay ng bawat Pilipino, bakit hindi po? Kagalang-galang na ako.
Now, I suppose your forte is election laws.
Ako, hindi lang po election law, Justice Hermosissima. I worked for 9 years in the office of Senator Jokno. I was involved in the private practice of law for 26 years before
Have
I
you
joined
been a
Congress.
litigation lawyer
Opo. Yes, Your Honor, please. Handling criminal, civil, and labor cases.
So you realize that the Supreme Court is a court of general jurisdiction. And so if a case is assigned to you and it's not your forte, you cannot refuse.
Kaso po sa Regional Trial Court,
No, in Supreme Court.
yes, Your Honor, please. Well,
You're
it cannot,
applying-
of course.
You're
it
applying for Chief
Yes, Your Honor.
Justice. You forget that.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Totoo po na talagang hindi na pwedeng reviewin po ng hukuman yung decision pong ito. That's why po a justice should be very careful in ruling on cases pending before it, because it is the highest tribunal. It is the Supreme Court, and we have to bow and respect decisions of the Supreme Court.
Have you tried cases involving criminal law, complicated civil cases?
Your Honor, please, many of these
Administrative
cases are
law.
now in the Supreme Court, cases that have handled while in the office of Senator Jokno, and cases I handled on my own after the death of Senator Jokno. And several of these cases are now in DESCRA.
So you have handled cases on appeal,
On appeal,
not only
opo.
to the Court of Appeals but also to the Supreme Court.
Opo. The case of Nolasco versus Panyo on search warrants, the case of Surya versus Pineda on right to education that was decided by the Court of Appeals, and other several cases, Your Honor, I've handled and are now found in the SCRA and being studied by law students.
Well, let's go back to my first question. You do not propose that decisions as Chief Justice will be in Filipino.
Not at this time po, Justice Hermosissima. Mukhang hindi po handa ang ating bansa at
I
ating
was
mga
wondering
kababayan.
because all the while you have been talking in Filipino.
But I would favor at this time po opinions written in English or ponencias, but gradually po.
In the decisions that you write for the COMELEC, were these decisions in English or in
These were decisions,
Filipino?
Your Honor, please, written in English.
Oh.
Well, of course, in these proceedings, it's really for show because the whole country will be listening to you.
That's all, sir. Okay.
Salamat po.
Secretary Mosngi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions. I'm sufficiently enlightened by the answers of the aspirant.
Kaibigan ko si Commissioner Rene. He used to appear before me sa RTC tsaka sa Sandigan Bayan Oh.
If I may add, Your Honor, please, I've appeared before Judge Valderrama, Judge
I know.
Mendoza,
I
Judge
know.
Peralta,
Yeah.
Judge
Even-
Rosamin,
Yeah.
sa RTC po.
You haven't changed yet. You're still the humble practitioner that we know.
Maraming salamat po, Justice.
Ang tanong ko lang dati nag-apply ka sa sa justice lang ng Korte Suprema Hindi ho ba?
Totoo po yan. Kagalang-galang na hukom.
Bakit ngayon nag-apply ka ng Chief Justice, Commissioner Rene?
Una-una po, Justice Peralta, ako po ay na-shortlist. Hindi na po ako na-appoint na member ng Supreme Court as an Associate Justice. So ito po ay isang malaking pagkakataon po para sa akin, para magsilbi po sa ating bansa. So I think to be a Chief Magistrate or Chief Justice is not only a visionary, but also a leader and CEO, an all-out, all-season public servant. So I think this is now the opportunity for you to introduce changes in the judiciary.
Kasi may reservations kasi dati Naalala ko, nung nag-apply kang Justice ng Korte Suprema, galing sa isang Assistant Commissioner, may mga views nun na dapat ata pumunta muna sa Court of Appeals bago pumunta rito sa Korte Suprema. Kasi tradition, yung mga nanggagaling sa COMELEC, papunta sa Supreme Court as Associate Justice, mga chairpersons yun Si Justice Pardo, chairman ng COMELEC. Tanong nun, paano yung Assistant Commissioner, diretso sa Korte Suprema, Associate Justice? Sabi nila, dapat dadaan mo na sa Court of Appeals. Kaya tinanong ko, Assistant Commissioner, probably iniisip mo, baka siswertein ka ngayon. Dati hindi ka sinwerte sa Associate Justice. Kaya Chief Justice na ang inambisyonan mo nun. Ngayon.
Kagalang-galang na Justice Peralta, ako po ay nagkaroon ng isang refleksyon. And since 1986, I've been in government as member of the CONCON. Ako po ay nagsilbi po sa Presidential Human Rights Committee, kasama po si Justice J.B. Reyes. Ako po ay nagsilbi po sa Select Committee to screen judges and justices. Ang aming pong pinuno ay si Secretary Neptali Gonzales, kasama po si Undersecretary Renato Puno, at kasama po si Solicitor General Cedfio Ordonez. Ako po ay nagsilbi sa Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process. Ako po ay naging chairman ng negotiating panel dealing with the CPP in Norway and Netherlands, and also dealing with the Muslim insurgents in the South.
Kasama mo ata dati si Justice Tesle Castro, hindi ho?
Kasama ko po, dalawa po sa miyembro ng hukuman. Ang kasama ko sa peace process sa Netherlands and Norway, Justice Brion was our consultant on labor. Kasama ko po sa Norway. Justice Tesle Castro ay kasama ko for many years in the peace process. Siya po ay nasa Department of Justice and work with us in the peace process.
Sa OSG, sino kasama mo nun sa OSG?
Kasama ko po ang Solgen Bebot Bello, na aming naging pinuno sa peace panel negotiating with the CPP and PA.
Ito gusto ko lang tanungin kasi nagkakaproblema kami sa HRED tungkol sa mga party list, hindi ba?
Opo.
Yung mga questions of nominations on party list, dinadala sa dinadala sa COMELEC, hindi ba? Kayo may jurisdiction.
Opo.
Kung into ba, maging candidate, ng party list o hindi. Di ba? Pinagsasubmit nyo ng evidence, lahat-lahat. Then, i-decide nyo based on the totality of the evidence, pwedeng kandidato ito. Hindi ho ba? So,
tama po.
party list, election, nakakuha sila ng nominee. Hindi ho ba?
Totoo po.
Pagkakuha ng nominee, na-elect na yung party list, nag-oath na as member of Congress as a nominee, no? Pagtapos, nagpapile sila sa HRET ng kaso. Pinapadisqualify. Using the same grounds, doon sa COMELEC, which you have already resolved. Ang tanong ko ganito hindi ba meron overlapping of jurisdiction? Kasi nakalagay kasi sa, I think you read that case of Lim Kay Chong, ano Pagsabi, ang congressman has taken his oath as member of Congress, so any question as to his qualifications, jurisdiction is HRET. Hindi ba? So, ang ginagawa nila, using the same arguments doon sa COMELEC, dahil yun ang pinalil sa petition sa COMELEC, disqualification din to be a nominee Ngayon, pag-take out na ngayon, file a disqualification, co-warranto doon sa amin at hindi he should be disqualified. Tama ho ba yung observation ko?
Maganda po ang observation ni Justice Peralta. Following a long line of decisions once proclaimed, ousted po ng jurisdiction ang COMELEC, pupunta po sa HRET. I think isa po itong issue na dapat pag-aralan po ng Korte Suprema. Now, using Section 5, Paragraph 5, Section 10 promulgates rules relating to enforcement of constitutional rights, pleading, practice, and procedure in courts of law, admission to the bar, and legal assistance of the underprivileged.
No.
Magandang tingin po ito, kagalang-galang na.
You're referring to Paragraph 5 of Section 5 of Article. Nagpapasalamat nga kami sa mga members ng constitutional body dahil sinama yung protection and enforcement of constitutional rights na mayroon kaming power of we have na rule-making power, di ba?
Totoo
Kaya
po.
lumabas yung sinasabi mong writ of amparo writ of
kalikasan, writ of habeas data.
Ngayon gusto ko pang dagdagan, writ of salvation. Akala ko yung writ of salvation na proposal mo, babae yun. Salvation hindi
po.
ba? Okay. Isang tanong ko doon sa Article 12, Paragraph 1, yan ang basis kasi na sinasabi nila naging aggressive na masyado ang Korte Suprema, hindi ba? Yung grave abuse of discretion, kahit na political issues daw, to a certain extent, rinirasolve na ng Supreme Court, should be only, we are not supposed to encroach on political issue, no? Now, ang tanong doon kasama ka ba doon sa nag-propose doon sa Constitutional Convention?
Your Honor, please, it was a proposal made by Chief Justice Roberto Concepcion, expanding the meaning of judicial power.
Yeah.
And since we respect the esteemed retired Chief Justice at that time, based on his experience in credentials and expertise, we respected his proposal and it was adopted.
I think, gusto niya marahil use the Supreme Court to check abuses of the executive and the legislative. Probably, I think that was his purpose.
Ang paliwanag po ni Chief Justice Roberto Concepcion dyan, it does not totally erode the political question doctrine, but simply limits political question doctrine. So, nandyan pa rin po yung political question. Medyo may limitasyon lang po. Batay po sa karanasan na naging kasamahan niyo po sa Korte Suprema.
Ngunit, maganda pa para sa amin yan. Para isama na kita, maganda pa para sa atin yan. Isama na kita.
Opo.
Maganda pa yun?
Ay, maganda po yan.
So, dapat hindi papalitan yan.
Ay, huwag palitan po ang judicial power dahil nga po, silensyo po ang U.S. Constitution on the judicial power. Silensyo po ang 35 and 70 Constitution. It's only in the 87 Constitution that we have an expanded meaning of judicial power. Ito po ay maganda po sa atin at sa hukuman ng Pilipinas.
Alam mo, merong mga questions galing sa Twitter.
Opo.
Tanong ata ni Madam Karen Davila ito
Opo.
Itong tanong niya. During his interview with former Commissioner Lagman, that means the interview conducted by Ms. Karen Davila.
Gas Lagman.
Commissioner Lagman, yeah. Not Justice Lagman, Commissioner Lagman, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Lagman po, Gas Lagman ng COMELEC.
She could be a good chairperson of the COMELEC.
Opo.
During the interview of Madam Karen Davila with former Commissioner Lagman, according to her, Commissioner Lagman admitted that the filing of the case against GMA was rash. Binilisan daw ng COMELEC, tanong na nito, do you agree? Gusto niyang marahil yung tanong, gusto niyang parebat o yung sinabi ni Commissioner Lagman sa interview. I think that's what I understand from the question.
Justice Peralta, I think I will disagree. Dahil even before we decided on the case whether to file it or not, approve the recommendation of DOJ in COMELEC. Ito po ay pinag-aralan ko po. And then, nakita ko po yung recommendation. I've been in the practice of law for 26 years. At sa tingin ko naman po, after evaluation, ay pwede pong i-file. So hindi po haphazard, but prior to that, I studied affidavits of the complainants against the respondents. And
madaling salita, you had sufficient time to read.
Yes, in so far as I'm concerned, sufficient po yung time na pag-aralan po.
Nandun po ba si Commissioner Lagman nun?
Nandun po, siya po ay bumoto for the filing of the information.
For the filing,
Opo.
Oh, so he joined you, in other words.
He joined us. Kami po ay ilang bumoto po doon, kasama pong aming chairman, Commissioner Yusuf, Commissioner Lagman, Commissioner Lim, and yours truly.
Ngayon, meron din isang tanong dito sa Twitter. Tinatanong niya, ano ba ang inyong masasabi tungkol sa kasalukuyang sistema ng party list? It is a general question.
Maganda pong katanungan niyan, Justice Peralta, dahil ako po ang nagpasimuno sa COMELEC to fine-tune the provisions on party list. Very vague po ang provision ng Republic Act 7941. Sino bang kumakatawan ng marginalized? Ano po ang marginalized? Ano po ang underrepresented? Up to this very day, no amendments were introduced to Republic 7941. So we proposed a resolution. It's now resolution number 9366 to further fine-tune Republic Act 7941.
Where is that resolution?
We have a copy. It was promulgated already, Your Honor. Please, as a matter of fact, you want to be a nominee of the marginalized, you prove by your track record, by speeches and documents that you are.
You know, the problem there is that you were citing the case of Mr. Mikey Arroyo, is it not?
Hindi lang po siya.
No, in particular, but you mentioned...
Opo.
Ang sinasabi mo ron, hindi siya pwedeng maging nominee ng party list ng gwardiya dahil hindi siya gwardiya. Ganun ba yun? Yung bang decision
po ang punto ko po, nagalang-galang na hukom kung bakit po ako ay nag-disagree.